Recently, Jay-Z made hip-hop history. No, I'm not talking about being the first rapper to be banned from all NBA games because his missus can't be polite. I'm talking about Jay becoming hip-hop's first bona fide billionaire. I know some people might be a little bit confused by this because it wasn't too long ago that Dr. Dre was actually being touted as hip-hop's first billionaire. But it turns out that Forbes is actually a much more respectable measurement of somebody's wealth than a drunken Tyrese Gibson.
I'm the first billionaire in hip-hop right here from the West Coast, believe it.
And as such, it turned out that although a $3.2 billion deal was struck with Apple to sell Beats Electronics, Dr. Dre himself actually only walked away with a measly few $100 million. Oh, you can't even buy a private island on the Bahamas for that. But if there's one thing that we can learn from Jay-Z smashing this billionaire milestone, it's that the path to a Billi is paved with brand deals. In fact, all the hip-hop moguls that have broken through that 9-figure mark have all gotten there through lucrative brand partnerships. Who can forget that pivotal moment in hip-hop entrepreneurship history when Jimmy Iovine leaned into Dr. Dre and said, "Forget sneakers, let's sell low-quality speakers," or something like that. But beyond that, both P. Diddy and 50 Cent have both made hundreds of millions of dollars flogging liquid-based diabetes and alcoholism respectively. And then of course there's myself, your boy Trap Lord Ross, and incarcerated drill rapper Young Shush, who were on the road to a Billi with this endorsement.
I love Chris Rich.
Shout out to their sponsor Swagbucks. Swag. Best way to make money on the side by doing surveys, watching videos and playing games, you get me? Yeah. Shout out to Swagbucks one time. Look, Swagbucks. Today's sponsor is Swagbucks. If you want to make cash, try Swagbucks. You want gift cards, try Swagbucks. Swagbucks. Today's sponsor is Swagbucks. Make money from home, try Swagbucks. Surveys, playing games, yeah, Swagbucks. Wish I knew about Swagbucks when I was trapping. I used to have no money till Swagbucks was cracking. Link in my description gets you $5 free. If you support Swagbucks, then you're supporting me. It's easy doing surveys and playing games. You can earn cash gift cards to your favorite place. I've been getting hella gift cards from hella places. Amazon, Walmart, Old Navy, even Macy's. Yeah, Swagbucks. Today's sponsor is Swagbucks. If you want to make cash, try Swagbucks. You want gift cards, try Swagbucks. Swagbucks. Today's sponsor is Swagbucks. Make money from home, try Swagbucks. Surveys, playing games, yeah, Swagbucks. You get me, it's a Swagbucks ting. All day, Swagbucks all day. I use Swagbucks, why don't you? What, you not on Swagbucks? Oh, I don't really want to chat if you're not on Swagbucks, bro, you get me?
Woo! Yeah, baby. Back to the video. So we all know that good brand partnerships are the main ingredient to a billion-dollar souffle. In fact, Jay-Z is a master of making deals work in his favor, and if there's one company that he's finessed in the biggest way, it's everybody's least favorite mobile operator, Sprint.
I'm also here to talk about Sprint. As you can see, you stand to save up to 17 cents a month over the more dependable providers.
Now, Jay-Z actually made two major finesses on Sprint at the same damn time in 2017. But what a lot of people overlook is that Jay-Z had actually spent several years trying to get his head around the bundled album sales finesse. When Jay-Z had dropped his earlier album Magna Carta Holy Grail, he actually attempted to pre-sell 1 million copies of the album to Samsung, which could then be downloaded as part of the Magna Carta Holy Grail app on Samsung devices. Hey, in some ways it's kind of like Uber. Hit a button, get an average album. I'm not saying that Magna Carta Holy Grail was a bad album, I'm just saying that you probably could have got the same result if you'd have just recorded a 3-second song saying I like art and you're poor. As part of this deal, Jay-Z actually got several commercials for the album that were produced by Samsung, including this one where it's reported that they actually paid $2 million for Jay-Z to play this invisible piano. So the deal was signed, Jay-Z was pre-selling 1 million copies of the album to Samsung, and everything was set for him to immediately go platinum on release day. However, at this point, Billboard decided to call foul on this finesse and decided not to allow the albums to contribute to the SoundScan sales figures. This story is actually pretty topical considering what's going on with DJ Khaled at the moment. If you don't know, DJ Khaled recently hit the #2 spot in Billboard and was upset because 100,000 copies of his album that were bundled with energy drink sales were disallowed. We nearly the best! I personally think that this was right to be blocked. Just think about it this way, if you'd have bundled Lil Pump's recent album with a 30p can of baked beans, it's highly likely that I'll have bought the bundle, consumed the entire can of baked beans, and then thrown that copy of Lil Pump's album straight into the trash. Just because your terrible album was bundled with something that I found delicious doesn't mean that you should get the #1 spot on Billboard. And Jay-Z actually addressed this in a 2013 Breakfast Club interview where he oh so maturely suggested that the reason that these download clicks weren't counted is because so many people were clicking and trying to get his album that the website crashed.
Right, and you couldn't get through, you hit it 20 times. So that's 20 million hits. It was 20 million hits for the app, and it broke.
Yeah, right, Jay. But to be fair, Jay-Z's album by no means did badly. It ended up moving 528,000 units in the first week, which was way beyond the projection of 400,000. But the second week sales were a pretty disappointing 129,000 records sold. But then again, the album stayed at #1, and 129,000 sales is probably a lot more than what most people would debut these days. But so it was, Jay-Z had his fingers burnt with the dark art of album pre-sales. But Jay came back with a vengeance and ended up packaging the next deal that he did with a much bigger and more evil corporate overlord. So this time around, Jay's album 444 would be offered exclusively on Tidal and to Sprint customers, with Sprint purchasing 1 million copies of the album in pre-sales for any of their customers to claim. Though let's not forget that it was Sprint that were promoting this project. Many customers did report the first tracks coming through loud and clear before getting cut off. But it all worked out, and it seemed like Jay had actually made a much bigger finesse than we initially thought. 444 immediately went platinum in the first week from these finessed album sales, and Jay-Z even posted a picture of him collecting his platinum plaque that supposedly was actually taken before the thing had even released. Apparently that million sales was made up from the Tidal streaming figures as well as the amount of people that downloaded and claimed their free copies from Sprint. Reportedly, this was different from how they tried to do it with Magna Carta, because in this case it was much clearer how many people had actually clicked and claimed that album as opposed to just pre-sales bought. But the streaming numbers on Tidal weren't actually reported. The RIAA and Sprint didn't actually publicly offer up any figures on how many people actually did click through to the album, and they declined to comment to reporters when asked. This is a little bit fishy when you compare that to the actual album sales that went down separate to this finesse. Equivalent album sales, including all streams from other platforms, was only 262,000, and actual sales of the album itself were again really low at 174,000 copies sold. In many ways, keeping these numbers in mind, this would probably be considered one of Jay-Z's weakest releases of all time. Even by the end of the year, album sales had only hit 399,000, excluding the million that were finessed. But in spite of all that, that album did still go to #1. And apparently by the 2nd of July, the album was actually being given away completely free to anyone that wanted it from 444.tidal.com. So apparently Sprint couldn't even give these things away. But why was Sprint so eager to get finessed by Jay-Z for 1 million copies of his album? Well, it turns out that in January of that same year, 2017, Sprint had actually bought a third of Tidal from Jay-Z for $200 million, valuing the whole company at $600 million. This is a huge finesse considering the fact that he only paid $56 million for the company as a whole through his investment company. It's highly possible this whole thing was agreed as one big deal, giving Jay-Z a huge return on his Tidal investment as well as a million album sale finesse. And all of that on Sprint's dime. So there you have it, a $200 million finesse against Sprint by Jay-Z, and all you had to do was give over a third of a substandard streaming service and 1 million copies of your worst performing album in decades. Back in 1994, Jay-Z started drinking Cristal, ordering it in nightclubs to impress his contemporaries that had never heard of the brand. And hey, Cristal was a pretty classy brand. The high-end champagne dates all the way back to Russian Emperor Alexander II, who in 1876, whilst fearing assassination, ordered that all of the bottles of champagne for his emperor's dinner be made clear so that he could see what was inside. And it's for that same reason that Donald Glover rides in an invisible car.
You know he got that invisible car.
But like all good things in hip-hop and culture, eventually everyone found out and ruined it. By the mid-90s and early 2000, everybody and their mum was drinking Cristal. Tupac allegedly created a cocktail called Thug's Passion, which was a mixture of Cristal and Alizé Gold Passion. Snoop called Cristal his favorite and showed off a bunch of it whilst appearing on Cribs.
My favorite, Cristal.
And for all the UK heads in the audience, the So Solid crew were brandishing bottles of Cristal on stage when they won their Brit Award in 2002. 21 seconds, 21 seconds, And who could ever forget that Jay-Z famously rapped on Hard Knock Life that he would often drink Cristal and piss himself. But by 2006, Cristal had done an oopsie and ended up getting the Gucci treatment from Jay-Z. An Economist article came out under the headline Unwanted Attention, where Frederick Roussard, the global manager of Cristal, was asked about all the attention that they were getting from the hip-hop community. community. His response was, "What can we do? We can't forbid people from buying it." Yeah, that wasn't a good idea. This actually went down as one of the most embarrassing incidents of a company insulting its audience since Gerald Ratner, CEO of a jewelry brand, came out at a conference and said that his products were total crap. Now, it didn't take long for Jay-Z to see the opportunity for a major finesse here, so he sprung into action and called for a boycott against Cristal. Jay-Z came out publicly and said that if they considered the attention from the hip-hop community as unwanted attention, then he felt that was racist, and he decided that he would no longer stock Cristal in any of his 40/40 clubs or drink it in his personal life. And it didn't take long for Jay-Z to release his Show Me What You Got video, which featured a scene where he rejects a bottle of Cristal in favor of a nice bottle of Ace of Spades. But where the hell did this Ace of Spades stuff come from? Well, reportedly, Jay traveled to France looking for cheap wine and champagne brands that he could bring back to the home country and make a profit. My dad actually used to do something similar on the ferry with a white van. Well, Jay-Z found a brand called Armand de Brognac, and initially the company that owned them, Sovereign Brands, were just paying Jay-Z as an ambassador to promote the drink. But interestingly, Jay-Z actually publicly denied any association between him and the brand at the time. Allegedly, he believed that any financial aspect of that endorsement might endanger the authenticity of him shouting it out. Let's talk about the authenticity of that product. Ace of Spades is the casual name for Armand de Brognac, but apparently what that champagne actually is was a discontinued champagne from Sovereign Brands called Cartier Antique Gold. And this stuff used to sell for $60 a bottle. So essentially, Jay-Z took a defunct $60 a bottle champagne brand, note that it only cost them $13 to produce one of these bottles, wrapped those bottles in tinfoil, assumingly so the government couldn't read what it was thinking, and slapped a $250 price tag on it. And reportedly, this started paying dividends early. Despite the hush-hush about Jay-Z's financial aspect of the deal, some people have reported that he earned around $4 million a year from this deal. But you certainly couldn't say it tasted like $1 million. New York City wine expert Lyle Fass has famously said that this champagne tastes like shit and was the biggest rip-off in the history of wine. But then again, Fine magazine placed it at #1 on their top champagnes of 2010. I mean, that would have been slightly more convincing had it come from Good magazine, but still. But just taking big checks wasn't enough for the mogul Jay-Z, and he decided in 2014 to buy the entire Armand de Brognac brand from Sovereign Brands for an undisclosed amount. So we don't know what Jay-Z necessarily earned on this deal, but what we do know is that now, as he's being announced as a billionaire, people are valuing his stake in Armand de Brognac at $300 million. But what does Lyle Fass have to say about that? Everybody should take a lesson who wants to sell wine that sucks, because it probably is the most brilliant marketing in the history of wine. So who really got finessed here? Is it the French winemakers that Jay brought out? Not really, because Sovereign Brands got an absolutely huge bag off of Jay-Z, and their brands weren't really doing much before he came along. So did Cristal get finessed by Jay-Z for losing all of their business in this boycott? Well, actually no, because many years later Cristal actually said that the boycott never even hurt them. In fact, the global sales manager for Cristal even said that after Jay-Z's announcements, a lot of international organizations contacted them and brought up their leftover stock that wasn't being sold in the US. And apparently, the US market did only take up 15% of their sales. So, the only person left that could have been finessed is you, the consumer. In fact, that stings a lot more when you realize that the $250 bottle of Ace of Spades is only what you would pay for retail. If you're in a nightclub popping bottles of Ace of Spades, they could cost you upwards of $1,000 a bottle or more. In fact, one of the biggest bottles that they offer is $200,000 for one bottle. So the real people being finessed by Jay-Z on this one are actually the rappers, ball players, and wannabe show-offs, or basically just anybody dumb enough to spend thousands of dollars in a nightclub for a $13 bottle of champagne with a sparkler taped onto it. I'm looking at you, Don Johnson, I'm looking at you, LL Cool J, and I'm looking at you, Kyrie Irving. Hey, at least Compton rapper The Game was frugal enough to bring his own empty bottle from home.
These is candle holders, duh. Candle holders. I gotta hit you with the Nicole Richie, duh.
In fact, during my research, I was actually able to find the single most expensive bottle of Ace of Spades in the world, which is this, the Dynasty. This actually costs 330,000 euros and has to be carried by 4 people on a stretcher to your table at a nightclub, which is handy because they can use that same stretcher to carry you to the hospital when you have alcohol poisoning. If anything, Jay-Z has been a pretty shrewd businessman when it comes to achieving synergy between his businesses, because since he launched Roc Nation Sport, he essentially has an army of overpaid, uninformed ball players who are definitely going to spunk thousands on cheap bottles of champagne in the club after they win. But not every brand deal that comes along is going to work out. Sometimes you think you got a Beats by Dre on your hands, but you end up with an SMS Audio. Now, when I first heard that Jay-Z was planning on releasing a fragrance into the luxury market, I thought that was just a polite way of him saying he farted in his Maybach. But no, it turns out that Jay-Z had actually signed a deal with Parlux Fragrances to launch his new cologne, Jay-Z Gold. Now, I'm assuming that that's an upmarket affair with scents of Jay-Z's current millionaire lifestyle. I'm thinking more Beechwood than Bando. Apparently, some reviewers have noted that it's got scents of lavender and a lingering scent of amber, which is nice because usually the only place that lingering scents of amber are found are in British rappers' beds. But this cologne deal turned stinky real quick. By 2016, it had emerged that Parlux Fragrances were actually suing Jay-Z for $18 to $20 million. They say that Jay-Z didn't make good on his obligations under the contract to promote the fragrance, which isn't completely true. He was reported to have leaned into the press conference when they launched the fragrance and shouted, "He who smelt it dealt it." So the claims made in court was that Jay-Z failed to turn up to 3 agreed appearances with Parlux to promote this brand, and that included a botched appearance on Good Morning America. Jay-Z's retort was that he had been on an international tour all year, and his contractual obligations for that tour meant that he couldn't come back and make appearances. And so that same year in June, Jay-Z actually countersued Parlux for $2.7 million, suggesting that they actually hadn't paid him any of the royalties that he had been owed for this deal, and also that they failed to put the marketing budget behind the brand that they had promised. They said they were going to put $5 million behind getting this thing off the ground, but apparently they didn't. Jay-Z said that because they hadn't paid him, they had breached the agreement, which gave him the right to void it and not turn up to any appearances. He also said that they caused damage to his reputation and made it more difficult for him to land business deals in future. And that's actually completely true. As a result of this botched deal, Jay-Z lost out on a lucrative opportunity to partner with Febreze. They were actually planning on releasing a Jay-Z branded air freshener, perfect for somebody that's just taken a smelly dump or for clearing the air after listening to the Unfinished Business album. In September 2018, the court actually ruled in favor of Parlux and ordered Jay-Z to turn over documents about his schedule in 2013, 14, and 15. This was because apparently every time they tried to set up a meeting with Jay-Z over this period, he'd completely curved them. Jay-Z's response to this was that they were just trying to get personal information out of a celebrity and he shouldn't be subjected to this scrutiny. But as of now, this case is still actually unresolved. And because Parlux have publicly complained about loads of leftover inventory and people constantly returning bottles that they've bought, I've decided that I'm going to help them out. That video, if you did, I would suggest that you go and check out my other video on how P. Diddy made his biggest corporate finesse. It's probably one of the most underrated videos in my catalog, and it definitely deserves a watch. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, peace out.